In 2017, the Harrison Sasquatch Museum opened in the former offices of the Visitor Information Center. The museum temporarily relocated in 2022 thanks to funding from the Community Economic Recovery and Infrastructure Program to build an accessible visitor center. In 2024, we opened our doors at the new Harrison Visitor Information Center plus Sasquatch Museum, back at our previous location. Our Sasquatch Museum primarily focuses on the Sasquatch, but now also features exhibits, including the Land of the Giants and the STSAL's Longhouse Room. From compelling artifacts and historical narratives to first-hand witness accounts and scientific exploration, our museum promises an immersive journey through the realms of both fact and folklore. Explore new exhibits, including captivating carvings, interactive displays, and a glimpse into the rich heritage within the STSAL's Longhouse. Delve into the depths of Sasquatch lore and myths, uncovering the stories that have fascinated generations. Take your picture with our 8-foot Sasquatch or pick up a souvenir. Entrance to the museum is free and is open during the regular hours of the Visitor Center for 99 Hot Springs Road.
Harrison Hot Springs has opened a Sasquatch Museum, and for the past week, our own colleague, Thomas Steenburg, has played host at that location. So we're going to get the scoop on what this museum is all about from Thomas tonight. Now, joining me are our good friend Bill Reed, and of course, Thomas Steenburg. How you doing, Thomas? How you doing, Bill?
Pretty good, thank you. How about yourself?
Excellent. Now, just a little backgrounder here. Thomas, I understand that this location, this current location, and the previous location were not the original proposed spots for the museum. It was to be placed originally over by Sasquatch Provincial Park.
Oh, actually, that was a different museum.
Oh, a different museum.
Yeah. That was a private project that was started up. We were trying to find a home for the Chris Murphy traveling exhibit, which is unfortunately now in New York and probably will never get it back. But the fellow who runs the Sasquatch trailer park,
John, yeah.
Yeah, and where Bill Miller was staying, he owns property right out there where the Y junction is to go to Sasquatch Park or to go down to the picnic area.
Yes.
And we were thinking of putting it there because we always thought if we have a museum, if we have to rent, we're beaten before we start, right? You got to own the building and stuff, and he was willing to do it. But then the red tape and the realization of permits, this, that, blah.
Oh, yeah.
And it just completely deterred him. That and the fact that Chris Murphy, God bless him, said, well, we got to have this, we got to have that. And it just became, well, he basically said the hell with it. So that was the end of that. Now, the present museum was originally in a little house that was on the same site. It was a little 100-year-old house, and one room was very tastefully done. Was set up to be a Sasquatch museum. And Doug Ryerson, who was the head of tourism at the time, we really have to thank him because he got together with myself and the late Bill Miller. It seemed to me about 15 years ago that Harrison Hot Springs was once again going through one of those phases where we are too sophisticated to be associated with this Sasquatch concept. So we're going to try to promote tourism, through more, politically correct things like wine and cheese tasting contests and things like that. Yeah. and they're trying to find a way to boost tourism. So we were there. Doug Ryerson asked Bill Miller and myself to go to this public meeting, and all the business owners were there. And I spoke up and I said, look, you already have a connection. That's the town's connection to the Sasquatch legend. You should push that and push it as hard as you can. And I could see them in the back rolling their eyes like, oh, here we go.
Mhm.
But fortunately, Doug Ryerson liked what we had to say. And he had the idea of museum. And he's the reason why statues started coming back in the entrance to town. Remember, they all disappeared. All the signs
Yes,
started
they
disappearing.
did.
Yeah.
Yes.
A lot of the places like Bigfoot campgrounds and Sasquatch RV Park changed their name to the Springs. They all called the Springs this and the Springs that. And then he said, "No, we're gonna push the Sasquatch," and they did. And the idea was to put a museum in the little building, but it was 100-year-old house, and there was no like handicap access to it or anything like that. So that was the reason they applied for a grant, and they used that. Well, we have to have handicap access, stuff like that. And to their surprise and delight, the province said, okay. And the information center was in, and the city hall is right next to it. I said, okay. And that's how the new building started. They tried for the longest time to get someone to buy the little house that it was in, because it was a 100-year-old house and they wanted to save it. They didn't want it demolished, but they ended up getting demolished anyway, because the guy who bought it found out what he'd have to pay to move it, and he said, "The heck with that." And so it ended up getting demolished. So the museum and the info center temporarily for a year was in a downtown location right around the corner on I believe it's called First Street or First Avenue there, or no, Second Avenue. And where what used to be the Sasquatch store, where you had a little shop there with all kinds of signs and souvenirs, and it stayed there for a year while the new building was constructed. And of course, there were delays and stuff and permits and blah, 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 blah. So it was originally supposed to be finished around Christmas time, but delays and stuff had it put off until now.
And I must admit, it is a very stately looking building.
It's a fine building, and there's a little bit more room for the museum so they can add more stuff to it.
And we just this is the visitor information.
That's what you see as soon as you go in the door.
So there's lots of knickknacks and books. I hope you got a lot of books in there, Thomas.
Oh yeah. They're selling books. They always have. It's pretty good there.
And now, who's this fellow here with the coonskin cap? Actually,
That's
looks like a rabbit.
Stehalis carvings that you see as soon as you go in the door.
Yeah.
Yeah. That doesn't represent Sasquatch. That just represents First Nation cultural history and stuff as you first walk in the door.
And then we have cast,
That's the display devoted to the Patterson Gimlin film, and they have copies of Roger Patterson's the two footprints that he carved the day he shot the film, and of course the continuation of the little statue there that the Russians made. There was a copy of that. I gave that to Bill Miller, and Bill Miller donated to the museum. And on top, there's a screen showing my copy of the first generation copy of the PG film.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay. Moving over here. Now we got a closer view of this tapestry. Do you know anything about this?
Yes, it's a Stehalis, they call it a story blanket.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and it's basically a story of one of their statues about the Sasquatch. That's not the original. The original is still hanging in their main building on the reserve. They made a copy of it for us for the exhibit in the museum. There's a little bit more of the Stehalis First Nation on display. Like you see the bowls there to the left or to the right, and depicting images of the Sasquatch, or as their original name called it, for their name for the Sasquatch, which is where the name Sasquatch was coined in the first place in 1929. Yeah. And of course, the display, most display the Gigantopithecus skull with the gorilla skull and the human skull on the bottom, and the footprint castings, all of which I donated to the museum.
Yeah, that was going to be a question I had. You now see that the other thing that sort of dropped Harrison Hot Springs' fortunes were when they lost the John Green sponsored sandcastle competitions.
Yeah.
That was devastating.
Well, the reason they lost it is because John Green himself was personally sponsoring it. He was paying for most of it. And there's one thing we've noticed about Harrison Hot Springs. When a good idea comes, like Bill Miller, the late Bill Miller, had an idea of a real lifelike statue to be displayed either at City Hall of a Sasquatch or at the
hotel.
At the hotel, the resort. And everyone thought it was a great idea as long as somebody else paid for it. Right? That's what it always comes down to. Oh, it's a great idea as long as I don't have to pay for it. Yeah.
You know, that monkey is in the lobby still, isn't it, at the hotel?
Yeah.
I haven't, that's shameful. I have yet to see that. I've yet to wander up there to the hotel and check that out.
Yeah. Well, right now they got a big stuffed bear in a Mountie uniform. That's what they have.
Oh, well, it's patriotic, you know. Yeah. Speaking of John Green, he's mementos and stuff currently over at Kilby Village.
Yeah,
do you think they'll ever find a place in this building?
If the Kilby Museum doesn't want it anymore, I know Ryerson was talking to them.
Yeah.
But as far as I know, the Kilby Museum is keeping the John Green exhibit, at least now for the at least near future.
So, Thomas, do you know if this new museum, if it's actually designated as a museum or is it a tourist information center at this time?
Tourist Information / Sasquatch Museum. That's what it's called. You call them up, you say you've reached the Harrison Hot Springs Tourist Information Center and Sasquatch Museum.
Because depending on what its designation is, if it's not an official museum, Kilby might not be able to transfer anything there just because of that. So, and I don't know the ins or outs of it, but I'd assume that they would have to have that museum designation to even attempt to transfer anything.
I think it does, but I'll check on that. That's something I never thought of.
The Pacific Northwest and California, I guess, are riddled with Sasquatch museums and bookstores and you name it. Well, as far as I know, this is the only Sasquatch museum in BC, if not maybe in all of Canada. Why are Canadians so lackadaisical on this subject, Thomas?
That's one of the biggest things I've noticed through the decades is the difference in the attitude of the people. I mean, the Pacific Northwest of the United States, Bigfoot is everywhere. Shops, museums, restaurants, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The only place in all of British Columbia like that would be Harrison Hot Springs. And like I said, there's been several incidents through the decades where the town seemed to want to distance itself from the Sasquatch.
Yeah, it seems like, that seems like it's hanging on by its fingernails.
Oh, it was.
It could go again any moment.
No, I don't think so now because the statues are all back in place. And the town of Creston, when the Kokanee campaign was going on, they tried to claim that they were the gateway to Sasquatch country, and Harrison Hot Springs got all up in arms with that. So they may have been trying to distance themselves, but when someone else tried to take it, they said no.
Yeah, I drove through Creston, and Bigfoot was all over the place.
Yeah,
all on the lamp standards. It was in the parking lots. It was everywhere. I mean, Kokanee and Brew and the Mugwump and Sasquatch. They were everywhere you looked.
Part of the thing is, though, as well, is we've got to be careful with when we're talking about museum. I think, in the U.S., most of the quote unquote Bigfoot museums down there are really not museums. They're private enterprises designed to turn a profit. And, and good on those people. They're down there, taking a tourist trap or tourist information and making a profit out of it. And for whatever reason here in Canada, and it could be, population numbers being, a relatively low population, we haven't got that same sort of spirit where we can take these niche markets and make them into profit centers.
Yeah, I think another way to say it, Bill, is the government and the red tape and the BS and the cost tend to deter projects like this. Private.
No, yeah, that's not what I'm getting at, Thomas. It's like you get a guy like say yourself, right? You go, you rent a small store somewhere, you buy a bunch of made in China, Bigfoot, Sasquatch memorabilia, throw your cash out, have somebody in at minimum wage, and you call yourself, the Thomas Steenburg Sasquatch Museum, and you're there for profit. There's a lot more. There's a lot more of that in the U.S.
Oh yeah,
than there is here, and the thing is a lot of those ones in the U.S. that call themselves museums, they're not museums in what we're thinking of as being, places of learning. They're just a proprietary business that's hooked onto a tourist niche.
Yeah,
I think we don't tend to do that as much as the Americans, and I think part of it is because of just the population.
Yes, exactly.
We had that museum for years in Hope. That was the Sasquatch. It was privately run. It was a business, but it just didn't get the business.
Yeah, Rene Dahinden's widow, Wanja, tried to open the year I arrived here in BC permanently. She tried to open a little museum there, and I remember spending a day helping lug in that big redwood statue down there, putting it in. It lasted one summer.
And part of it's real estate values as well. If you're in a small town even in, like, say, in Saskatchewan, for argument's sake, but if you're in a small town in the U.S., a lot of those storefronts you can get for, $10,000-$20,000, where here, you're going to be looking at, $3,000 and $4,000 a month just on lease payments for, a very small storefront.
Yeah.
Well, the amount of money you would have to generate to make that business profitable is just unreal. The Lower Mainland is really out for anything of that nature, unless you have a huge online marketing campaign that can pay for things in the background.
Bingo.
Whatever happened to that plywood cutout of Sasquatch? The Hancock still have that down in Surrey? Remember myself and you threw it in the back of the truck and drove from
That's part of
Westminster out to the hotel with that thing in the back of the truck. People looking at us, a big 8-foot brown Sasquatch in the back of the pickup.
We broke our backs that day moving all that stuff there, and
didn't even get a thank you.
Didn't even get a thank you.
We were there at it from 6 a.m. till 6 p.m.
Well, that's all part of the Chris Murphy, and right now it's in Lauren Coleman's museum in New York State. I think it's moving to Maine. I just heard they closed down. They're moving to a new location in Maine.
Yeah, we really got to talk to Chris and see if we can get that display moved to Harrison. That really it belongs in BC. It's mostly British Columbia.
Oh, I'm all for that.
And I mean,
Chris, when he was involved, was extremely, to me anyway, extremely helpful when it came to building the website that I built and passed on a lot of information. And but I tried to get a hold of him about a year and a half ago, and see if he could come on this show for a chat. And he just got back and he said, no, I don't do that anymore. So in other words, he divests his hands of everything is to do with Sasquatch.
Well,
That's
Chris
why
is
he gave that gal in Ontario all of his notes and his stories and everything. I forget what it's called. It's an extensive site, though. If you want to check out Chris Murphy's stuff, go to that site. There's a heck of a lot of information.
Yeah, Sasquatch Canada. That's the site.
Sasquatch Canada.
Right.
Yeah,
And,
she does a good job.
Yeah, she did a virtual museum of his stuff, which is really well done.
Yeah.
Yeah, kudos to her.
I mean, when it was down in Yakima, that was the best layout I ever saw. That was excellent. Remember how it was set up in Yakima?
Yeah, it was great. It was great. But I have nowhere to compare it to. That was the only time I saw. Oh no, I saw it in Yale as well, and Yale was nice, but Yale was quite cramped. When it was there.
Well, again, a little house over 100 years old.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you see some of your possessions ending up there someday, Thomas? What do you say, Bill? What do you say, Bill?
What I say, we're going to make it the Thomas Steenburg Memorial Museum, and me and a couple of others are going to be selling Thomas's ashes to people, and we're going to make $1 million off of it.
Sell his ashes in 5-gallon buckets.
Exactly. You too could have a piece of Thomas.
That's right.
Well, I'm just not going to die, man.
Just for that, you shall live forever.
Actually, a great amount of the stuff that's in the museum is mine. It's on permanent loan to them. And when I pass away, everything's written down. It'll be up to you guys to decide where goes what goes where. My Gigantopithecus skull is yours, Bill.
Oh, gee.
Yeah. Matter of fact, that's what they gave instead of. They asked me because I was doing all this for nothing, and both Bill and I said, "They said, what can we do for you?" I said, "Well, I'll tell you what. When you order a copy of the Grover Krantz's Gigantopithecus black eye skull for the museum, order a second one for me." That's how I got mine.
So, Thomas, you and our good friend Bill Miller used to operate Bigfoot tours when Bill was alive.
Yeah.
Could you see a project like that working in conjunction to an operating museum like this one here? Give them the rights to come through town with the UTV from the hotel.
Well, apparently there's a group doing that now, and
really
surprises me because Bill and I tried to jump through every hoop you can imagine to try and get permission to use the machine on the paved roads, and we couldn't do it. It was just.
I can understand from Harrison, say the Sasquatch Provincial, because that road is narrow and twisty and turny, and it's no place really for a UTV.
Well, it's just illegal here in the Lower Mainland to drive a UTV on paved roads.
And unless you get a special permit.
A special permit. But
yeah, you can get one from the RCMP and it's a designated route.
Yeah, Bill even had signal lights and everything put onto it before
he did.
Yeah. And then they said, "Oh, you can do it, but we have to take your machine and test it." What do you mean? We crash it.
Yeah. Well, the Department of Transport would.
Yeah.
Department of Transport would have to take it apart to see if it met factory specs.
Yeah, we had to go. So we had to go meet our guests up at the turnoff there where the dirt road started. And that's where we loaded up and on. But this group now somehow has permission.
That's because they changed the law. They changed the law, Thomas. They did it probably about 8 or 10 years ago. They changed it where the RCMP can designate certain routes. That's like in Tulameen. They have if you can actually drive your UTV and ATV through part of the main road of Tulameen. It's because of that change in the law.
Yeah, what we would do, we would just drive into Princeton, go to the cop shop and say, I'm here for 3 days. They'd get you to sign a form and give you a map. This is where you're allowed to take your ATV or UTV between these hours and what days. And Bill is absolutely right. You could drive from Coalmount to Tulameen for supplies if you wanted to, on private roads and on paved sections of the town. You know, but I mean, in the States, you can go to the supermarket, you know.
Well, it's interesting. I as part of my job, I go to Quebec, and you get into the rural areas, and they've got, you know, the signs for snowmobile and ATV crossings all over the place, include some of their provincial highways that are, you know, along the size of the Coquihalla, and you know, here they've got signs, and people can take their equipment across these roads. So there's no as long as you get proper insurance, liability insurance, there's no reason why they can't do that on some of these secondary roads.
I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say, when I was growing up in Bancroft, Ontario, snow machines basically replaced cars on the main roads in the wintertime. They were all over.
Mm-hmm. It's a practicality thing, you know. But I was thinking it'd be great to be able to go on a tour like that. Then after the tour, to swing back to the museum and take it all in and buy some stuffed Sasquatches or something from the lobby. And that'll be a pretty neat, well-spent day.
And they could even do something like have a micro bus that has, you know, one end of it's at the museum. They have another one up by the park where it's just a little bus stop, shelter area where people can stay out of the weather. You know, you do a drive from there, from the museum up to the transport point, load on the side-by-sides or the UTVs, and then get the tour. Because, you know, I was talking to one of the guys I work with, a good friend of mine, that I'm going to be, Thomas doesn't know it yet, but I'm going to try to arrange a meeting with Thomas to take him on a tour, because, you know, there is a lot of people that are still fascinated by the subject. And if you can get somebody like Thomas to describe it to you, it's great. I mean, he can ad lib it. He knows the stories, and he can answer questions. He's just not reading off a script.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I did a lot of them for Bill, and Bill did a lot of them. But I think that Bill's devotion to getting it to work as a result really badly affected his health.
Yeah, but he also, you know, God rest him, he didn't do it right. Like he undersold it. You know, he was selling people a 4-hour tour, giving them 6 hours. You know, my daughter who works on websites and that had offered to help him update his website to make it more user friendly, and his heart was in the right place, but he didn't have that business sense.
He wasn't a businessman. He wasn't a businessman. I mean, I went through his stuff after his death, and he, in some ways, he was over fastidious, and in other ways, he just let it whichever way the wind blows, kind of thing. That guy had receipts for 12 years old of getting a tire changed. One flat tire, and the bill was 7 years old. Like, you know, I mean, that says his whole personality. But no, he was not a businessman. But yeah, he had a lot of passion, and he had a lot of passion for the subject in general. So, yeah. I was going to ask you, Thomas, I was going to say, with this new reincarnation of this museum, I'm really appreciative to have this museum here, because it's like a solid dimension of evidence, you might say, something you can see it, you can touch it, And that's pretty rare in the Sasquatch community. It's, it's a good base to touch off every now and then to see, the core, if you could say that, to see the core of what we believe to be pertaining to Sasquatch. So, I think it's a wonderful thing you can touch base with. You can go, you can see the skull, you can see the castings, and you can see all various bric-a-brac and everything. And instead of what we do, which is live most of our lives listening to other people tell us their stories and making extraordinary claims with no evidence, and the only thing they offer us is, take my word for it, it happened. I have no proof, but take my word for it, it happened, So it's nice to see something like this museum that does offer, not proof, but it does offer more evidence for the subject of Sasquatch.
Well, it basically gives the visiting public to Harrison an introduction to the legend.
I think it's more well-rounded as well, Thomas, because it has aspects from, the local Chehalis band.
Absolutely,
it has aspects from early researchers. Too much of what people see today is, from the old, we're, what is it, decades since we've had Finding Bigfoot, but we're still feeling the repercussions of it, or, that silly, what was it, Alaska killer Bigfoot.
Oh, yeah. Part 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what people are seeing, and it's nice to have a place that's not for profit, not selling any other agenda than this is the history of the subject in this area. Now, whether it's mythology or whether there's something there, people can go in, they can look at your, one of the casts that you yourself had made, look at it and say, yeah, I can see a footprint in there, or I don't know what that is. Or they can look at, one of the other casts of footprints here, and they can make their own mind up on what that represents. And I think that's a good thing.
It gives you a bit more of a layer of trust in the subject. I think instead of somebody just telling you an anecdotal story or somebody trying to hawk something, it's no, this is there for you to study, and draw your own conclusions. You're not getting strong-armed by somebody else to believe anything or buy anything. It's much like you just said, Bill. Yeah. Let me ask you something, Thomas.
Go ahead.
If you ever saw a Sasquatch, clearly saw a Sasquatch, would you run around telling strangers about it on the internet? I mean, you saw the Sasquatch, but you had no proof it happened.
I have spent 45 years chastising people for not getting photographs. If I saw a close-up Sasquatch, really close up, and I didn't get a picture of it, I think I'd keep my mouth shut.
Exactly.
Quite frankly.
Good point.
Yeah, because the one time I may have had a sighting in 2004, I tried to get a picture, but it was over so fast, it wasn't even time to get the camera.
Yeah, but yeah, well, we all of us look at all these shows and podcasts and everything else, and everybody has a story. Everybody has a story. But if you have any kind of evidence at all,
yeah,
and it makes you wonder.
You see me talk on this subject. I always say, if the Sasquatch exists, if this, if that.
Yes.
Because I'm always, if I suddenly stop doing that and say the Sasquatch does it, I've seen it.
Okay, fair enough. I'll keep my eye out for that one.
But like we've always said in our group, we need to be harder on each other than anybody else. So I would expect if I saw a Sasquatch and I came to you guys and said I saw one, I would expect the interview to be a lot, and the investigation to be a lot more in depth than what you do.
Yeah, it had to be held to a higher standard.
And if the same thing, if Thomas came up to me and said, I saw a Sasquatch, we're going to get him in the dark room with the bright light in his eyes and on the hard chair.
Well, we kind of already did that anyway with Joe Snyder, because Joe was unshakable in his story about what happened and what he saw and how he saw it and everything else.
Should have done that with a German accent.
Yeah, it was. But yeah, I'd expect to be held to a higher degree. My greatest fear is that I will probably someday see a Sasquatch, and nobody will believe it because they say he's been into Sasquatch for the past 30 years. He got Sasquatch on the brain, But then at the same time, why should I worry about what somebody else thinks? I solved the mystery. Ha ha ha.
Yeah.
Even if I never tell another soul, which will drive me crazy eventually down the road, even if I never told another soul, I solved the mystery. I know now. So I don't think I'd ever tell anybody, especially on the internet. There's no gaining by blabbing your mouth on the internet to anybody about it. I would pick, as that gentleman right there said, I would pick out one or two close, sensible friends and tell them the story, and they can make of it what they want. But that would be it. I would never have an urge to come on a program like this and tell my story. So, Well,
I always think to that meme that you see running around there where it has a guy sitting in his campfire, and Sasquatch walks over to him, pulls a beer out of his cooler, sits down on a log opposite him, takes a big drink of the beer, and looks at him and says, "Nobody's going to believe you."
That's right. I'm going to drink all your beer, and nobody will ever believe you. Yeah.
Well, I love that Far Side comic where just as Dale came into the clearing and saw Bigfoot, Jackie Onassis, and the Loch Ness Monster standing there, his camera jammed.
Yeah. Yeah, the Far Side relieves a lot of stress in this subject, I can tell you that. Yeah. Moving along, who's this jolly fellow, Thomas?
Oh, they've had that forever. That's just for the kids right inside the door. So they like to stand there and get their pictures taken with that. Yeah. They've had that since it was in the old building.
Yeah. I remember him.
Yeah. And that's
the Land of Giants.
That's right in right out the as soon as you pass through where the info center is, there's the Land of the Giants. That's the entrance to the museum right there.
Yeah, I can see a stuffed Sasquatch with his big feet sticking out. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, let's get a little closer on this baby. Now, there's a BC monster for you.
Yep, a sturgeon. There's a little misinformation I noticed on that. It said the record sturgeon on there was 14 feet. It's the record sturgeon in the Fraser is 22 feet. And that was only about 10, 12 years ago.
Yeah.
I remember that because the young man who caught it was on our tour. He was telling us all about it the day after he was in the paper. Yeah. More than First Nations connections to Halis, the Bukwas and
that's the dancer's mask.
Yeah.
I got that drum. Yeah. Peekaboo.
Yeah, that's the statue. It's now standing there. He's also done a young one there to the right and a deer in front. Whereas in the temporary building, we only had the main statue. It's created by a young First Nation man whose I tried to I couldn't remember his name. I tried to phone today, but the museum's closed, so I can't remember his name. I think I sent you a photo of him standing with it in the woods.
Okay, I got you. I was wondering who that guy was. Yeah. There's a close-up.
Yeah. It's a 7-foot tall statue, what he thinks a Sasquatch should really look like. And we got it for the museum when it was in the temporary, and it was there right in the window for the longest time. And I think he did a pretty good job on it. I like the way they threw in the dirt and the mud.
Make it a bit more realistic.
Yeah.
Yeah. What is John Green's family still in possession of the Skookum cast copy?
I think the Kilby Museum has that, but they did not put it on display.
Oh. I'm looking at this here, the way this layout is, Yep. Yeah, what they should do right there in that little nook where this Sasquatch is and the deer and that, maybe they should put a CD player there in the corner with the Sierra sounds playing on a loop.
They have a display monitor on the other wall where you can basically hit buttons to hear different vocalizations and see different stories.
Really?
Recreation.
That's neat.
Recreation of, the Ape Canyon incident, Albert Osman, that kind of thing. Yeah.
It would be definitely worth a trip out there to see this museum for sure.
Mm-hmm.
It's much more spacious than the older one was.
And they've got that map there with Harrison Lake with numbers, and you can look in the book to read about the incident. I always thought they should have that they could put out the money, a recording where you can punch the number in and a voice will tell you what the incident was.
So how many days were you out there for this week?
2 days.
Twice. Now the official opening is on the first part of June to coincide with Sasquatch Days. Is that correct?
No, the official opening was May the 4th. That's why I was there.
Oh, I thought there was mention of it being the ribbon cutting ceremony on Sasquatch Days.
Oh, I haven't heard about that. I thought they just opened the doors and said, "Come on in."
Well, basically they did, but they're making it an official thing, I guess, to pump up Sasquatch Days even more, kind of thing.
Well, maybe.
The main thing I love about this museum is that there will never, ever be a Dogman display there. Praise the Lord.
Yeah.
Strictly Sasquatch, please.
We kind of made that clear in the beginning of the little building. You vote to the Sasquatch only. Forget this other stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Zoological only, please.
They may actually be doing that in June because the parking lot isn't finished yet. So people have to park in the overflow field there right next to the city hall, which is a few yards down. The parking lot won't be finished till June. So, yeah.
See, it all comes together June for some reason, And,
that's him. That's the young man who designed it. That's him standing behind it.
Yeah, that was a good shot. And there's a close-up of him.
Mm-hmm. Now, make sure you mark that because someone's going to copy that and try to put it on the internet saying they photographed the real Sasquatch. Yeah.
It'll be on Nikki's show next week.
Yeah. Show us what you got.
Yeah. And I don't know why these are turning out to be so small. But anyway, there we have good friends of ours.
Yeah, John
Kirk from left to right. His lovely wife, Winona.
Winston Churchill.
Steenburg, the usual guy, and Jim Poulton. So.
Yeah, they all came out in the 4th, show their support, and we had a real nice dinner at the Sasquatch Inn on the way home.
That's the thing is that for a lot of people in the Vancouver area, it's quite the jaunt to go out to
Harrison Hot Springs.
Harrison, but it's especially in the summer. You've got the beautiful lake, beautiful beach. Town itself is a nice little town. The museum is there, and then if you're adults only, you hit the Sasquatch Inn for some fantastic food.
Yeah. The one drawback is on May 15th, those horrible parking meters will be in service again.
Oh, really?
Oh. Not the good old-fashioned coin ones. No, you got to use your credit card or something.
Ooh, boy.
Thomas ever falls in a mud puddle, he's going to drown because of all the coins in his pocket.
And he'll have the quarter with the string
I don't know.
attached
There's
to
just
it.
something wrong about going into credit card debt to use a parking meter. I mean,
Little bit of unfinished business. This is May month, and there's a number of days which have great significance during the month. The Cinco de Mayo, there's Mother's Day, and there's time to dance around the maypole.
when's
And
Mother's
also-
Day?
And also, it's time on May the 6th to wish somebody a happy birthday. And to do that is the incomparable Satchmo. I hope you get some
Hey, you did.
presents.
That's a little better than when you had me dancing with Olivia Newton-John. I mean, I still get comments on that.
Yeah, well, why not? It's a happy birthday, my friend.
Thank you, sir. 63 today.
63, going once, going twice, 63.
Mm.
Yeah. Hey, okay, this is from your three compatriots at the Bukwas crew. This from three of us.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, happy birthday, happy birthday to you.
You can see we spare no expense around here. And we don't share any expenses either.
Well, thank you, guys. Thank you for the good wishes. 63.
63. Wow, to be that young
Just
again.
a year ago, I was 62.
Yeah, it seems like just a year ago, doesn't it? Yeah,
Yeah.
right. God, could have been worse. I had the two old guys in the balcony from the Muppet Show. I said, no, that's a bit too much. Yeah, they really would have lampooned you. Yeah.
Okay, now I need you to clarify something for me. You said Mother's Day. When the hell is that?
Sunday.
Sunday.
This coming Sunday.
So you better get a card in the mail, man.
Yeah,
As
we're
I
supposed to
always say, it's Thomas good to his mother, Steenburg.
Okay.
Yeah.
What time are we doing the show on Sunday so I know when to my phone
We
home?
haven't set a time yet. We
Oh,
just
God.
said Sunday.
Because if I miss calling my good old mother, I won't hear the end of it for a week.
A week, you're lucky. Boy.
Chris, man.
Yeah. So,
Father's Day, mothers don't care, but mothers, oh my God, don't miss those.
there's a special place in hell for those who do.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed. Yeah. That's a wrap for this show. And we wish Thomas a happy birthday. and sincerely. And yeah,